Hello, and welcome back to another episode for Project Seed Money. My name is Sharissa Bradley, and I am so excited to be joined today with author and editor Annmarie SanSevero. And thank you so much for being here today and spending some time with us. I can't wait to get into this.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Have you always wanted to be a writer?
So, I was a nerdy child who always wanted to be everything, and that included a writer. Like, I wanted to be a writer, a scientist. Originally, my first dream was to be a rockette. I grew up on Staten Island in New York, but I learned there was a height requirement that I was nowhere near meeting. So, that was my first dream crusher. But I have gotten to do a lot of the things that I have dreamt about through homeschooling my kids, like my sciencey stuff. I have a lab in my kitchen with two professional microscopes and beakers and test tubes and chemicals, and we've dissected so many things. And so I've gotten to fulfill a lot of dreams while raising my children. And the writing came later because I was a single mom raising four kids and homeschooling them and working three part-time jobs. And so they were my main focus. And about the time they hit junior high, my youngest hit junior high, I realized if I don't start this dream now, it's never going to happen. And so I sat them down and said, "Hey, mommy wants to write. And I know I can't do it a lot, but I'm going to ask, just respect that I'm going to take 15 minutes a day." And that's how I started, just 15 minutes because, work, kids, and stuff like that. But those 15 minutes add up. And you keep doing that. And eventually you have a whole novel that you can start shopping around. And so when people tell me, "Oh, I don't have time to write," I'm like, "You have time to write. I don't care if you take a laptop into the bathroom with you a couple of times a day, you have time to write." So that may be TMI, but so
No, that's such good advice. That's such good advice because as a mother, as someone who is busy, you know that there isn't always these large time blocks. And I think that reading books like the Stephen King book, where they said, write every single day for 1 hour at the exact same time in the exact same space, that was extremely disheartening for me because my children woke up at different times during the day, had different needs in the mornings, during the evening, and setting like a set time like that, it never really worked for me. So I really love that you found the 15 minutes, you asked for that respect, and then you went ahead and took that, and that's still a disciplined practice, so it takes discipline to do that.
yes. And so some of my friends laugh at me because I have this giant pink bag, like giant. And it has my laptop in it and some craft books and some other things, which I call my mobile office. So even though I was, homeschooling, we still had to do things like doctor's appointments and violin lessons and dance lessons and things like that. And because of my health, I had more doctor's appointments than all four kids combined. But that went with me. And so when I'm in a lobby watching my kids dance, I was typing. And so there's always ways to make it work. They're grown now and graduated. I still don't have a set schedule because, you know, doctor's appointments again and work stuff has emergencies. So I just make sure I get a minimum amount of writing done every day. Hopefully it's toward the beginning of the day, but if that can't happen, then it happens at the end. But I don't go to bed unless it happens. So
I love that. You really stick to it. And I love the way that you made it a travel thing. You can do these in all these different places. And I absolutely love that. So, just to get a timeline from the time that you sat your kids down and said, I'm going to start writing to the time that you published your first book, how long did that take you?
that took a while. It took several years for me to finish my book at 15 minutes a day. But I did finish, and there's a lot of people who just never do. And then there's the whole process of trying to find an agent and trying to shop it around and stuff. And agents take for, I know they're busy and I'm in a master's program for publishing right now, and we're doing an anthology. So I'm on the other end of the editor side with the slush pile and how many submissions we get. So I understand, but it takes forever to hear back. And then when I do, I would hear things like, "Oh, I love the voice. I love the characters. I love the story. but it's not what I was looking for right now. Do you have like a Taiwanese firefly kind of thing? I was like, no, I spent several years doing this one. So, and even if I realistically like said, okay, I'm going to write you a Taiwanese firefly, by the time I finished that, she'd have a different dream. So you don't write for the agent, you write the story you want to tell, and then you'll find the right place for it. So,
So then did you end up going the traditional route for publishing?
so I ended up, I will suggest if you have listeners that really want to be writers, it is very important to find a good writers conference where you can network and meet publishers and agents and things. A lot of writers conferences sometimes end up being a bunch of beginners who've never published and no one knows what they're doing. And publishers will come, and I've had publishers tell me this. We had one that came to my local writing conference who said, "Oh, yeah, we don't expect to get anyone from this. We're just here for the money." And so I never went back. I mean, what's the point if they're not going to take writers from this area seriously? And it took a while, but I found like my dream writing conference with Superstars Writing Seminars because they teach the craft and business side of writing. Most are just craft. And it was started by big name writers, Brandon Sanderson, Kevin J. Anderson, Dave Wolverton Farland, Eric Flint. So they got together and said, we know how to write. It's the business that we're, having trouble with. And so that's why they started it. And it has grown and grown and grown. And it is filled with people who know what they're doing and are willing to help even the newest people. So that's where I met my publisher. I did a pitch session and she asked for the first 3 chapters. And she was actually like a unicorn because most of the time when people ask for chapters, they're going to just say, okay, yes, give me the full or no, nothing. But she told me, I'll give you notes no matter what I decide, which don't expect that. I was like, this is a gift from the heavens. Okay, I'm excited. And when she wrote me, she said, well, good news and bad news. I have no notes, but that's because I love it and want to see the full. And so I sent her the full. And then after a while, and it does take a while, and you're praying and praying and, curled up in a ball hoping, she wrote me and said, hey, we like it. We want to publish it, but we want to do it as a 3-book series. And so, do you have 2 more ideas? So here's the thing. You are always told your first novel cannot be a series. So do not write a series. Just write a standalone novel. And if it's successful, then you can write it, work toward a series. So I just planned on a standalone novel, not a series. And I had already started working on a new, totally different thing. But I did not want to blow my opportunity. So I made up 2 ideas really fast and said, yes, I have some great ideas for this. Here's what I planned for book 2. Here's what I planned for book 3. And it was the closest I've ever come to lying in my life because I just made those up. And she wrote back and said, we love those. We'll send you the contract and we'll get started. So that was like wonderful, exciting, brilliant. But I never looked at a contract before. And I was unagented because I just was dealing with this publisher directly. Again, Superstars came to the rescue because one of the guys who teaches a class on contracts said, oh, send it to me. I will look at it. So I sent him the contract and he was like, okay, most of this is good. Have them change this and this and this, and then you'll be fine. So I sent them back the changes and they made most of them. There was one that they were like, we really want to keep this one. And as I talked to the other guy, he's like, yeah, that's okay. So anyway, I signed it with confidence because of the help I had from the networking I'd done at Superstars. And since then, I'd also been trying to win. And here's something else I'm going to highly recommend to new writers. I never wrote short stories before. I thought they were a waste of time. But at Superstars, Jonathan Mayberry did a class on why write short stories. I think it was part of a panel, but mostly what I remember was his information. And he was talking about how it's important. It teaches you pacing. It teaches you how to do a beginning, middle, end. It improves your writing. Also, it helps you test out ideas to see if they're worth spending a year writing a novel. And I thought, oh, those are all great reasons. And then I learned about Writers and Illustrators of the Future competition, which is like a career maker if you win it. And it's all short stories. So I thought those are all those great reasons I started writing short stories. And in fact, I have a short story collection out right now called The Butterfly Stroke and Other Stories. It's published by Stark Publishing, which is a different publisher than my middle grade stuff. That were all things I sent to Writers and Illustrators of the Future that got between honorable mention and semifinalist. So not a win, but close. and so, and it doing that improved my writing so much. From the time I started doing those short stories to now, I am a totally different writer, much more mature writing. And so I highly recommend that and looking into Writers and Illustrators of the Future because they're so supportive of new writers. So my plan is to enter until I either win or pro out. Once you have so many professional sales, you're no longer a writer of the future. You're already a writer. And so I am close to proing out. So I've got to hurry up with that win. But either way, I have had some stories that, some of them went into this collection. Some I've published with other markets. I have a short story out with Sally Port Magazine. One went into an anthology on cryptids. And so there's all kinds of ways to use those. And every word is improving your craft. So nothing is wasted.
There were so many tips in that. You gave so many tips. Obviously, you got to get a community. It's imperative if you're a writer to have a community, someone that you can, a group of people that you can bounce ideas off of. It's even better if they have professionals in their community, not just people who are writing, but people who can help you on the other side of it. I think that is brilliant. And then just these tips on writing the short stories. I find it nearly impossible to write a short story. Okay. And I'll tell you this, I host a creative writing community. And so every month we do write short stories and you have to like do a prompt and answer the prompt. And I find it so challenging because you have to have beginning, middle, and end, and not very long because we're all sharing in the group. So you can't take up that much time. It is so challenging. So I can see how it would make you just better and better your craft. That's really beautiful advice. And I do hope your win comes so soon. I'm excited for you.
So do I. I will tell you, there's a beautiful, I'll give you two pieces of advice about short stories that might help. This is something that Dean Koontz told to either Jonathan Maybay or Kevin J. Anderson. I can't remember which one. But he said he writes the beginning, he writes the end, and then he fills in the middle based on the word count that's needed. And so that was really helpful to me. Another one is, are you familiar with Brandon Sanderson?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, most people are, but every once in a while I come across someone who's not, and I have to do the whole greatest fantasy writer of modern times kind of thing.
So I'm a very much a nerd. I will know all the nerdy things.
Yes, he's one of the judges of Writers of the Future too, but he's not able to win. In fact, one of my proudest accomplishments is I've gotten a higher rating with Writers of the Future than he did. So it's like, yes, there's hope for me. So, but he does a class at BYU and he puts it all online on YouTube. And in that, he did a short story lesson. But because, as you know, with Brandon, he cannot write short, he did not feel he was qualified enough to teach it. So he had Mary Robinette Coles come and do the class. And she had them go through this exercise where they wrote a 250-word short story during the class with her taking them through each step. So that's worth looking up. It's really well done and shows you how to keep things tight, but really have the visceral sensory images you need that keep people engaged. So I thought that was really helpful.
Oh, I'm going to try to find that and link that in the description because I feel like that is such a good piece of advice. I wonder, when you were going through this process, you did mention that there was health challenges and there were other challenges like being a single mother, raising your 4 children, homeschooling their 4 children. How did you go through that process and face those things and yet still go through with publishing? And like you said, I finished the project and most people don't. You're so right. 99% of people are going to say, I'm going to write a book and it's never going to get past their notes app.
So, full disclosure, I am going through my second different cancer right now. So, I'm in treatments for that. I finished radiation, now in the chemo. It was totally different from my first cancer. And it was kind of one of those shockers because I thought, oh, I've done the cancer. I'm done with that. Right. And I thought, worst case scenario, I get the same one back. But no, overachiever, got a new one. And I asked the doctor, I said, I didn't know you could get two different cancers. And he said, oh, I've had patients who've gotten four. And I was like, okay, I'm competitive, but I'm leaving that prize alone. That is for someone else. But what I have found is so I have had a challenging life through abandonment and other issues in my health. And I've had surgeries in the double digits and just all kinds of multiple blood transfusions and iron infusions and all of it. And I have a mentor that gave me this phrase, and I didn't realize the phrase, but I was naturally doing it. Everything is research. And so everything I'm going through, the emotions or even just the experiences goes into my writing. So when I'm, for instance, my radiation, there's all this incredible tech going on around me. And even there was like the LINAC is what they call it, has these slots in it. And when you get to first, you have general radiation and then targeted, and those slots kind of morph into the shape of your particular tumor and target just that. Almost like I would think like an avatar kind of thing, like really cool kind of stuff. And I would never have known that had I not been dealing with this particular cancer. And so when I had my oncology, I would have radiation every day and once a week meet with the radiation oncologist. And he would say, do you have any questions about your treatment? And I might have one about the treatment, but then I was like, okay, but here's what I need to know. And I would ask all these questions about the
Tell me
tech. So
about the
when it,
equipment.
yeah. And so he would spend all this time explaining it to me. And he was like, and when he realized I was writing, he was like, tell me what book you have out right now, because anyone that's putting this much time into learning how it's really done, I want to read it. And so, which was nice, but also the emotions of when we would get together, you're assigned a vault, a radiation vault. And there are certain times, like they move you in and out, but you have people that are before you and after you. And we were there every day together. And we would talk about what we're scared of, or what the radiation birds are doing, or what if this doesn't work? And all the fear that comes with that. And those things play into my writing too. In fact, one of the short stories in my collection, The Butterfly Stroke, I was in the hospital I needed a blood transfusion. It was the weirdest thing. I love to exercise, even though my first cancer was thyroid cancer. And so I don't have a thyroid. They give you medicine to do that, to take care of that. But I also developed a pituitary tumor, which doesn't let my medicine work the way it should. So I have all these other issues going on. But I still work out a lot. And I was told my doctor, I can't get through my exercise routine. And he assumed it was a heart issue because I have a family history of heart issues. So he sent me to get an angiogram. And I had gotten to the point where I couldn't even walk across the room. And I called him and said, I don't think I'm going to make it to my appointment. I'm scared. And he said, you've got the earliest appointment. If you think you're having a heart attack, go to the ER. But it didn't feel like a heart attack. I just couldn't breathe. And so when I went, by the time I went, someone had to loan me a wheelchair to get me around the house. And they wheeled me into the hospital to get this angiogram. And they were doing the blood work for the angiogram. And they came in and said, we can't do your procedure. We have to take you to the ER. Your H&H is at a 5. And it's supposed to be at a 16. And so, but the ER was waiting for me. And when I got there, they were like, you're famous. And I was like, not the fame I'm going for, but okay. And I ended up having 2 blood transfusions in the hallway that day because they were so packed that I had to have them. And the funny thing was, I was sitting there with this blood going into me watching, and I was thinking, this is some person's blood. I don't know who this is. Like, I don't know anything about them. I feel like they should have bought me dinner, like all this stuff. And it was just, I don't know what it was, but it was creeping me out. I knew it was necessary, but it was weird. And then I started thinking, I ended up being hospitalized for like 2 weeks. And when I was in the hospital, and now they were putting iron, like giving me iron infusions, I kept thinking, what if it was something more intimate than just blood? What if it was my mind? Which to me, the way, who we are is the most intimate thing and the way we think. And that's, I wrote a short story called Memory Ghost about a woman who had to have a partial brain graft. And she started experiencing the memories of the donor. And then it turned out the donor had been murdered. And so she was like seeing her experiences and solving the murder through the memory she was having of this. So when you asked how my medical stuff plays into it, every one of my experiences of fear or loneliness or poverty, growing up, having poverty is hard and it's sometimes hard to write when you're like, should I be spending this 15 minutes writing when I'm not sure we're going to have food kind of thing. But at the same time, I knew not doing the 15 minutes wouldn't improve our circumstances. We'd still be poor. But if I do something working towards something better, that's worth it. So all of those emotions play into the writing. And what I want people to get is when they read my stuff, I want them to feel courage. I want them to feel resilient. And I want them to feel there's hope and they can do hard things that they never expected they could do. We can do way more than we think we're capable of. So anyway, that's how it plays in.
That's beautiful. It's sad and heartbreaking, but so beautiful. And I love that it has you telling me about the story of the with the brain graft. I mean, I literally have chills. That was so interesting the way that came about from blood transfusions and feeling like there's someone else's blood in my body. And then that becomes this story. And I think that is really, truly beautiful. And I love your courage. I can't imagine anyone even listening to this and not feeling like, wow, she has been through literal hell. I can write a book.
Yeah, if anyone gets anything out of this, trust me, if I can write a book, you can write a book. And so,
Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely. I wonder, after you were able to publish your first book, did you face any vulnerability after the fact? Like, now my stories are in the world. Now there's this info, people are now going to be reading what you've written versus where maybe before you just had like friends, family members, editors, things like that. But now that it's in the world, did you face any self vulnerabilities or worry that it was once it was out there?
so imposter syndrome is such a real thing. And I will tell you, my first draft of my book was awful, like horrible. And I was so proud of that. And I didn't realize it was awful. and so, and I was sending it out, but I kept learning the craft. It's important to keep growing and keep writing and stuff. And by the time I did several revisions, then it was like, okay, this isn't horrible. And it wasn't until I went back and read the first one that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I sent that to anyone, like anyone. And, but I think the people, like especially agents and editors, they're used to new writers. And, they'll probably send out a form rejection going, it's not right for us. But in their mind, they're not going, they should give up writing. In their mind, they're going, oh, this is a new writer. I'll probably hear from again in a couple of years, kind of thing. In fact, I'll tell you two things, one with imposter syndrome in a minute, but when I'm going through this slush pile for this anthology we're doing for the master's program I'm in, there was one person who submitted who is getting a rejection, but she had the one thing that's hard to teach, and that was voice. And there was a lot of crafty stuff she hadn't learned yet, which caused it to be rejected. But I saw so much potential in her writing that even though we've got almost 500 submissions already and can only take 25 stories, and there's still more time in the submission period. And so I know, there's going to be a lot of great stories that get rejected. I wrote to my professor and said, okay, I know we can't do this for every story we reject, but there's something about this woman's writing. Can I please write her a personal instead of just a form rejection and tell her what's good and where she needs to work so she can move forward? And he gave me permission to do that. Now, obviously, I can't do that with everyone. And so, but sometimes you see someone that there's just so much potential and she's going to get a rejection, but she should keep going. I am worried about, okay, every time I realize there's a review of my short story collection, there's a moment of panic, like where it's going to be, are they going to say, I don't know why this got published, or, it's something like that. So far, that hasn't happened. But I don't know whose book it was, but I've had several writers tell me about this. There was a review that went out. It was a 1-star review about someone's writing and said, it's like the writer was just making this up as they went. And part of me was like, I've got news for you. That's what every writer is doing. We're making up the whole thing. And then I had another friend who writes in a genre that I don't read, but someone had said, oh, this person's just doing this agenda. And they said this after like book 8. And she wrote back, now I don't recommend responding to negative reviews. Just leave it. But she happened to write back, it took you 8 books to figure that out. So there's going to be negative reviews, even in great works. And I know some people who are phenomenal bestsellers who get negative reviews. And I know people clamor to be around them because of how famous they are as a writer that have imposter syndrome. And that makes me feel better knowing that the people who I think have arrived are just as scared as I am. And that's how the networking helps, because you get these relationships with people who are open with you and honest and saying, oh no, I'm scared every time I go to a con and have to speak on a panel. Jim Butcher, who is probably most famous for his Dresden Files, but also does Codex Alera and some other things. Dresden Files is an urban fantasy about a wizard detective. And he mentioned at Superstars that he's a terrible introvert. But when he goes to these cons, he's interacting with fans who want to talk to him, and he's terrified. So he puts on what he calls his famous guy persona. So as he's walking in, he puts on famous guy, and he's smoozing with the people and talking and confident and all this other stuff. And then when he leaves, he takes off famous guy and goes and collapses and plays video games at home. And so I just have to figure out what my thing is. I probably won't be confident with famous guy, but I'm really good at helping person. I want to be the one that's helping people who want to be writers. And so I can, if I look at it as I'm helping someone, I can be more outgoing than I'm comfortable being. So I would rather hide behind my keyboard. So, but that's not how you
Well,
say.
I can tell from this interview already that you have such a heart for serving people and for teaching and for giving that information. It just feels so good. And I also feel like it's kind of a perfect segue into talking about your editing services, because you do help writers in their confidence, but you also do have a service that can help in that very direct way. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your services?
Sure. So I do 2 things. I have an editorial service where people can send me their story, and I can either do a developmental edit or a copy edit or both, depending on what they're needing. I am much cheaper than most editors, also because I know what it's like to be poor. I also do payment plans that most people don't do. So sometimes everybody's like, you're poor because you give stuff away. Like, yeah, that's okay. The other thing I do is mentorship with certain writers, but those I can't take as many of because that's very time consuming. And so what I do is, so I know people who charge like thousands of dollars for a mentorship, and I couldn't live with myself. So what I do is I don't charge them for the mentorship itself. But when I give them an assignment of something to write, I'll charge them for the editing of that, just like I would my developmental editing. But all our video conferencing where I talk to them about, okay, here's where I see your weaknesses are. Here's what I want you to work on. Here's the assignments to work on. There's no charge for that. So I really can only take a few of those a year just because they're very time consuming. But if someone's interested in that, they can write me. Editorial services, all that. I think you have my website link. All of that is on my website. It does have my rates. It has recommendations from people who've, like testimonies of people who use the services. So, okay, she can actually edit. Because anyone can just put on a website, I do developmental editing. And so one of the people I edit for is Martin L. Shoemaker, who was a Writers of the Future winner, and he's won sci-fi awards and things like that. And so he actually was one of my first clients because he's my mentor and I wanted to learn how to do this. And he asked me to edit something for him. And I said, okay, only if you're brutally honest with me about how I did, because it won't help me if I stink. And you're like, great job, And so, and he agreed, and it ended up such a good, now he has me edit so much of his stuff that it's been a great experience. So he put his review up there and there's a few others, but I love helping people. And so if there's someone who, like, if they look at the prices and are like, oh, I still can't afford that, and they're in a difficult circumstance, if they write me, I'm more likely than not to work something out for them. The exception being, if I have a mentee that just doesn't do the work, I can't waste my time with someone. There's plenty of other people who will. So, in fact, Kevin J. Anderson, who runs Superstars, was mentored by Dean Koontz growing up as a young writer, very young writer. And he said to Dean at one point, I can't believe you're spending all this time helping a nobody like me. And Dean's response was, I've tried to help a lot of writers. You're the only one who does the work. And so that's what makes the difference when you know someone's hungry and really wants to put the work in. So they can look on my website for that. Or if they just need advice on craft books, they can contact me. And if they want to study the craft first, I can give them some things that have helped me, and then they can write something better before they pay someone to look at it. And so any of those are fine with me.
That's so amazing. And that's so cool that you're so willing to help people. And I completely agree. If they're not willing to put in the work, there's no reason for you to waste your time. And so I would definitely recommend, if you're a serious writer, to reach out. Otherwise, if you're just kind of getting your feet wet, then wait on that. I will ask, where can we find your books and where can we find more about you? Is that all on your website as well?
It's all on my website. And right now, the thing out right now is The Butterfly Stroke and Other Stories, that has so many. And I put a paragraph about what led to the idea for each story so people could know. It's a short read, only 165 pages. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's widely distributed. So, you can get it on Apple and Kobo and all that other stuff too. But, if you do read it, please write a review because readers don't realize how much those reviews help the algorithm in making their books visible. So, I don't care if it's a bad review. If you hate it, you can say you hate it. I probably won't spread that review around in my newsletter or anything, but I had one last week where they're like, this writer's a genius. You better believe I spread that one around.
That one's getting a screenshot. Yeah.
That screenshot is going in my author newsletter that went on Facebook. So, but if they say, oh, this is so boring, then, okay, I'm sorry it didn't work for you. I'm not going to share that one.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. And that's another really good tip. If you do get good reviews, to share them around, because people should learn what other readers are feeling. And I love that. Yes. I will ask just one last question to finish us out. I wonder if you have any last bit of advice for our audience that are female authors and they're on the fence and they need that encouragement to keep going.
I would say, what's your dream for writing? What is the big thing you want to see happen? I call it my why. Why do I write? And for me, it's not just so I can get out of poverty, although that's a good plus if it works out, but I want to be a light and encouragement to other people. And if I don't write, I can't do that. And so whatever your why is, I would put that why somewhere. And when you don't feel like writing, even if your only goal is, I want a book in print, put that somewhere. And then when you don't feel like writing, you look at that, I want a book in print. It won't be in print if you don't write it. The only thing that stops you is quitting. If you keep going, I don't care how many rejections you get, eventually you're going to find the right publisher. You are going to find the right agent. You're going to find the right market, or even if you indie publish. So if you do that, you really do need to hire a professional editor. There are some really bad indie books out there, but you're going to find the right place. The only thing stopping you is quitting. So just keep going.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here and spending a little bit of time with us and for so much wisdom. I can't wait for my audience to hear this.
Thank you. You're very kind. You make me feel good about myself. I'm just going to have to, I should record that section and just play it over and over for myself.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode for Project Seed Money. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I will see you with another interview next week. Bye.